What is the absolute worst card in Clash Royale? A card so bad that it's just never worth even playing. Right now at this state of the game there are a few horrible cards that you better just not use. But let me tell you, these are nothing compared to the ones that I'm about to talk about. Cards that were so bad that should have never ever been an option in this game. Don't get it? Let me explain this to you. So let's talk about the log, and go back to when the log was released into the game. Now, for a card to be considered this bad, there are obviously so many reasons for it. On the first release of the log, it was weaker than now, but that still doesn't make it this bad. The log at this state was way different than today. It did do more damage in damage to towers, but there were a lot of issues with it. It didn't knock back big tanks, and the much bigger issue, log was just so slow. Just look how bad this is. Almost every spell in Clash Royale is instant, and log acted like this. But in this video we're not only talking about bad stats, because they are not actually enough. No, there are a lot more factors to this. And the first one that we're gonna talk about is a card that is being outclassed. You see, at the release of the log it was bad on its own, but it wasn't the only reason I'm talking about it. The thing about log is that when it was released, there was another card in the game that made it completely useless, and that is Zap. At this point in time, Zap was pretty much the best card in the game. It wasn't super game breaking, but if you didn't have it on your deck you were just playing wrong. And when the log was released being this bad, and Zap being this broken, the log at first was one of the worst cards to ever be in Clash Royale. But even though the log was obviously a trash card on release, it did get some buffs and eventually came back after Zap got killed. But if you want to be the worst card in the game, there are way bigger things. A few changes, you know, maybe the biggest nerf any card has ever received, ever, right? That's what the Royal Recruits once were. So let's go back to when they were released, because just like log, the Royal Recruits were a lot different than today. Even though they had pretty similar stats and the same amount of recruits, there was a massive difference in the card that made it completely broken. And that is that at the last second before the card was released, it was decided to be 6 elixir instead of 7. Now, this might not seem super impactful, but this one change made Royal Recruits actually game breaking. It was so messed up, and for a few days one of the most OP cards to ever exist was a thing. But this video isn't about broken cards, it's about the complete opposite. Why are you bringing this up? Well, after a few days Supercell finally decided that maybe this was a bit too much. So many people were telling them to just nerf this card, but what Supercell did was not what you would expect them. Instead of giving the Royal Recruits a good nerf, something that will balance them and make them not OP, instead of that, what they did was to increase their elixir from 6 to 8. Now, if you don't realize what the hell just happened, taking a card, even if it is OP, and making it cost 2 elixir more is basically just killing the thing completely. Turns out 2 elixir more was so much that Royal Recruits went from being extremely broken to one of the worst cards to ever exist in the game. And after another few months of this state, the Royal Recruits did eventually get fixed and were brought back to 7 elixir. But the thing about Royal Recruits is that they actually became a nightmare in this game. Every time this card is good, everybody hates going against it. Because this card can be good and is very toxic, people started to hate it. But that can't be said about the Witch, a card that was so bad that people weren't actually super happy about it. But one day, Clash Royale decided that they wanted to change the Witch. She was not fun to play against, but she was also really bad. So on October of 2019, the Witch would receive a rework. You know, just a little bit of changes about her, like a small HP nerf, a splash nerf, a hit speed nerf, a spawn speed nerf, and a 220% damage buff. What the absolute f***? This one rework made the Witch actually just way too broken, and for a full month she was basically the best card in the game. But wait, this video isn't about broken cards, right? Why am I talking about the Witch being super OP? Well, that's because after 1 month of this monster being in the game, Clash Royale decided again that this was way too much. So in the next balance change, the Witch would get completely gutted with nerfs. To start, The most basic thing about her, the splash damage, was just gone. Then the first batch of skeletons that came with her would be increased from 1 second to 3.5 seconds. And on top of all of that, her main attack speed, which is one of the main DPS factors, went from 1.4 seconds to 1.7. And just for a good perspective, a 0.1 hit speed increase is already a pretty big nerf, and the witch got 3 times that, on top of the other 2 massive nerfs. So what ended up is that this one card went from being the best in the game to being by far one of the worst cards in Clash Royale's history. Yes, she was this bad. The thing about the witch though is that for low level players she is pretty toxic, and to this day after they revert these changes, there are still people that hate the witch. But that can't be said about the heal spell. A card so bad it had to get literally deleted and just removed from the game. And when it came out, it was actually pretty decent. But right when the heal spell was added, there was a very massive issue with it. When heal was added into the game, it had no place in it. Everyone thought it was gonna be good, but it was just useless. Until the heal spell found its one and only place. The only time that heal was usable, the Three Musketeers. But the thing is, heal wasn't just viable in Three Musketeers, it was completely broken. If you fireball them, the Three Musketeers player will just heal them for almost full HP. And the same goes for poison. The heal spell healed just less than a 4 elixir spell, and it was 3 elixir. And because this strategy was so broken, Clash Royale had to do something about this. And what they decided to do was completely kill the heal spell. But Supercell weren't actually completely done with heal, because 1 year later, the heal spell would finally get another change. Everyone was super excited for it, because remember, heal was pretty much a dead card almost forever. Everybody was waiting for a good buff. But when this balance change came, Clash Royale decided to do a crazy rework. First of all, the heal spell now costs 1 elixir, but to compensate for that, the heal spell healed 63% less HP. Now, that seems like a good deal, doing less healing but literally being 1 elixir, right? That sounds pretty strong, but a few weeks after it came out, people realized that this version of the heal spell was way worse than the previous one. It was so bad that this heal spell actually had one of the worst stats that a card has ever had, and for another year this was the fate of the heal spell, until April 1st, 2020, when the heal spell got completely removed from the game. But if you think there is something worse, you have to subscribe.